Our speaker this evening hardly needs an introduction, but I'm going to ask you to give him an exceptionally warm spring harvest, Skegness spring harvest welcome. And that's kind of a better, warmer welcome than you would get at Minehead, or indeed Pwllheli, or Weymouth. His name is Rob Parsons. I haven't finished yet. I'll tell you when to clap. He heads up Care for the Family. He's a man who speaks not only from his head, but also from his heart. I want you to welcome Rob Parsons to speak to us this evening.
Well, thank you. That's really lovely of you. Thank you for that. It's great to be with you tonight. My wife Diane is here as well. She's down there, so it's great to have Diane. I appreciate that woman more and more as the years go by. You know, tonight we're talking about relationships, and it's been a tough day for me in relationships. It's strange when you speak about these things. Sometimes in your own family you face hassles and trials, but you know, when we're a little more vulnerable, we're safer. It was in Spring Harvest, I think it was 2 years ago, that one day in one of the family seminars, I found myself saying this: there's a man here and you're probably having an affair. In fact, you are having an affair. And I want to tell you what I think the next couple of years may hold for you. I repeated what I'd said to a young man who'd come into my study a couple of years ago. He just left his wife and 2 small children to go with a woman that he was having an affair with from his office. He didn't want to be in my home. He said his wife had asked him to come. I said, well, just give me a couple of minutes. Sit there. I want to tell you what I think the next 2 years may hold for you. We see more affairs in a week in Care for the Family than many people see in a lifetime. For the next 18 months, you'll know incredible sex, unbelievable conversation. You will catch yourself saying things like this: I think I'm alive for the first time in my life. I doubt I ever really loved her. Whenever a Christian man or a Christian woman, but say a Christian man in this case, leaves his wife for another woman, time and time again we'll hear him say several things. Number one, darling, we never really loved each other. We were so young. Secondly, in the long run, this will be better for you. Thirdly, in the long run, darling, this will be better for our kids. And fourthly, darling, I've prayed about this, and this is fine with God. And I say, you'll catch yourself saying things like that. You'll say, I'm alive for the first time in my life. The sex will be incredible, and then after about 18 months, it will begin to settle down to normal. And one night you'll be in bed, and one of you will say, no, not tonight, darling, and did you remember to put the rubbish out? And suddenly you'll find the normal invading your life, and then an amazing thing may happen. You will get yourself wondering what your kids look like when they woke first thing in the morning. I know you'll still see them at weekends and at Christmas and Easter, but you'll wonder what they look like when they wake first thing in the morning. And then a thing may happen which seems almost unbelievable to you now. You may begin to look back at your wife, and things that drive you crazy now will not seem such a big deal then. You'll catch yourself saying things like this: why was her dress size so much more important than the woman she was to me? And then you just may, catch yourself looking at the woman lying next to you. She may not seem as attractive as she does now. And the affair will have performed its great old trick. The affair comes and whispers in our ear, and it could happen to any one of us, including me, tomorrow. It whispers, trust me, it will be different with me. And it promises so much and exacts such an incredible price. He left my study. He never did leave his wife and family. Met his family at Pwllheli last week, his lovely man with his kids. And I said that in Spring Harvest a couple of years ago to that man. And I suppose it was about 2-3 weeks ago I got a letter from a woman, and this is what it said. It said, "I was in the audience when you said that, and my husband had his arm around me as you said it. And a month later, he told me he was leaving me for the woman he was having an affair with for some time." And then she said this, "I will never forget when he told our 2 children." She said, "Our 12-year-old boy literally bent double." Literally bent double, as if somebody had kicked him in the stomach. And he said, "Daddy, you can't go, because Mommy and I love you." That woman's in this big top somewhere tonight. We spoke on the phone. I said, "Do you mind if I recite what you have said to me?" She said, "You tell it wherever you go." She said, "You have no idea of the brokenness that's come in. You tried to get in touch with me earlier, and I couldn't get in touch with you. Come and see me afterwards if you would." She's here tonight. I cannot get the picture of that boy bent double out of my mind, and the incredible price that little family has paid. And tonight is about relationships, and we're such a mixed audience. There'll be married people and single people and lone parent mums and dads and young and old. But really, whether we're looking at parenting or singleness or marrieds, these are issues of relationship. With a little goodwill, we can interpret them to make it fit our situation. We read about Moses. Let me read you a little more about Moses. You know it so well. Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants walked along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the bulrushes and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying. She felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. And then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she said. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. It was probably Miriam. The Bible, as it does so often, takes us into the world of relationships, into marriages that struggle, and friendships that struggle, and ministries that struggle. But it begins, at least this story, in such an idyllic way. I must be the only person in the whole of Christendom who hasn't seen the film Prince of Egypt. So I can't take you back to those wonderful movie scenes of Moses, but I first heard this story in Sunday school. And I can take you back to Sunday school. I can still smell Sunday school. Our hymn books had kind of linoleum colors. I can smell those hymn books. I was there on the afternoon in Sunday school where this happened. Sunday school finished at 3:30. And the gospel meeting started in our little brethren assembly at 6:30. And whenever they were having a baptism, the deacons would come and they'd open the big open baptistry in the middle of the floor and put some heaters in, lest the newly saved people died of heart failure. And as little children, we would watch this happen. And at 3:30, the baptistry was open. And here she comes, this dear woman, an elder's wife, carrying a tray of biscuits right into the baptistry. I remember now seeing this dear woman floating amongst the custard creams. I was there when it happened in Sunday school. You remember film strips? Do you remember those? We used to call them film strips before video. I was there when our dear old secretary, who always got his notices wrong, he once announced the funeral of a woman who was sat 3 rows behind. But I was there the night, little boy listening to this great man of God, when he announced that after the gospel meeting, there would be a missionary, a strip film. Well, you can imagine the place was packed. The thought of these dear pioneers performing in this way. And I remember the songs of Sunday school. Do you remember those songs? I remember Deep and Wide, Deep and Wide. And I remember running over. And my Sunday school teacher was very safety conscious. And she had a second verse to that little song which went like this. Crossing over. Crossing over. Take great care when crossing over. If you look both ways, you will live for many days. Take great care when crossing over. And I remember time and time again them telling me the story of Moses in the bulrushes. This incredible story. And this sister who I believe loved him so much. But frankly, it was easy to love the baby in the cot in the bulrushes. This was not Moses the teenager. This was not Moses the murderer. This was a little baby. And you know how easy, if you have kids or you're single people, you go into your kids, your friends' kids' bedrooms, and you know how easy it is to love them when they are small. When you say, Nana, God bless, and they just look up at you and smile. It was relatively easy to love the baby in the bulrushes. And then we fast forward and we find God speaking to Moses out of a burning bush. The Living Bible puts it like this. When God saw that he'd got Moses' attention, he spoke to him. Hey, I wonder what else God has got to do to get your attention tonight. Some of you, it was the reason you came tonight, just to hear those words. What else has God got to do to get your attention? Moses, I want you to go to Pharaoh. I can't speak. Well, Aaron will help you. Your brother Aaron will do it. The brothers who are so gifted and so different, the brothers. You know, in the area of relationships, we can know tremendous conflict with siblings. Some of you now are not talking to brother and sister because when you were young, your parents used to compare you. Oh, if you can't put that right as quickly as you can, you don't know how long you've got them. Ring them even tonight, ring them tomorrow, swallow a little pride. If you can, repair those relationships in family, if you possibly can. Two brothers, so different. You know, my daughter Katie's 21, my boy's 18. Lloyd. And you know, while Katie was our only child, Dan and I thought we were the perfect parents. Katie was a compliant child. First thing Katie did when she came into the world was to apologize to the midwife for being a little late. Katie was at peace. She wanted to please. And so Dan and I gave other people advice on where they were going wrong with their kids in church. And then heaven, in its humor, sent us Lloyd. Lloyd did not apologize to the midwife. Lloyd attacked the midwife. You know, he said to me some years ago, he said, Dad, you know, when I was young, I used to think you loved Katie more than me. I said, son, I understand that. You see, son, two things conspired to make that happen. Firstly, whenever there was trouble, it was normally you at the middle of it. Secondly, I realize now that this clever sister of yours found a little way to shove her trouble onto you. But if you've got two kids like that, a little advice, if I may. Number one, don't lose heart. That child who is now breaking your heart can change. And don't take the compliant one for granted. He or she can change too. We have these wonderful children, Moses and Aaron. And the Bible says this. Aaron greeted Moses warmly. He was about to take on Pharaoh, but he greeted Moses warmly. Miriam loves Moses. Aaron greets him warmly. This is some family. Seems to be going well. Did Miriam love Moses? Yes. Did Aaron love Moses when they're called to minister together? Without doubt. What did that love mean? Well, we don't know, because it wasn't tested. Love is not real love that can be perceived in relationships until it is love that is tested. I can't get out of my mind the image that Richard Seltzer, a surgeon, gives in his book, Mortal Lives. It's a true story. He says, I am in a ward. A woman lies in her bed. A young husband stands near her. I have just removed a tumor in her cheek, and to do it, I have cut the nerve. I have left her mouth twisted in palsy, clownish mouth. She looks up at me and says, will my mouth always be twisted like this? I say, yes, it will. It is because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. He says, I like it. It's kind of cute. And suddenly I watch he is bend into her to kiss her crooked mouth. And I so close, I can see he is twisting his own lips to prove the kiss will still work. And I remember that the gods appeared in ancient times as men. And I hold my breath and let the wonder in. Did that young man want this woman to have the twisted mouth? No. Would he have loved to walk down the road with her perfect? Of course he would. But love will be tested. There will come times in all our relationship, if we're single people with our friends, when they betray us, when they let us down. When finally, as Jesus found, in our hour of most need, we are alone. There'll be times in our marriages where our partner is unattractive, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and at that time we are caused to twist our lips to prove the kiss still works. Love will be tested. And so it will be tested for this little family. You know, while I'm on the subject of looks, the world seems dominated these days by how we look. Somebody wrote this to me the other day. In their relationships, they were trying to improve it by getting a little fitter and looking better. He wrote this to me. He said, I've just purchased a week of private lessons at the local health club in an effort to look better and so be better in my relationships. Though still in great shape from when I was on the chess team in high school, I decided it was a good idea to press ahead with this idea. I called and made reservations with someone called Tanya, who was a 26-year-old aerobics instructor and athletic clothing model. Day one, I have to keep an exercise diary to chart my progress. Start the morning at 6 a.m. Tough to get up, but worth it when I arrive at the health club and Tanya is waiting for me. She is quite something. Long blonde hair. She took my pulse after 5 minutes on the treadmill and seemed surprised it was so high. Just standing next to Tanya adds about 10 points. Muscles are aching a little, especially the stomach, mainly from holding it in while I'm talking to her. This is gonna be great. Day two. Took a whole pot of coffee to get me out of the door, but I made it. Tanya had me lie on my back and push a heavy bar in the air. No problem. Then she put some weights on it. Legs are a little wobbly, but muscles feel great. Day three. The only way I can brush my teeth is by lying the toothbrush on the floor and moving my head back across it. Driving is okay so long as I don't try to steer. Tanya was impatient with me and said my screaming is bothering the other members. She tells me regular exercise will make me live longer. I can't imagine anything worse. Day four. Tanya was waiting for me with her vampire teeth in full snarl. I can't help it if I was a half hour late. Took me that long just to tie my shoes. She wants me to lift dumbbells. Not a chance, Tanya. The word dumb must be in there for a reason. Day five. I hate Tanya more than any human being has ever hated any other human being on the face of the earth. She thinks it will be a good idea to work my triceps. I have news for you, Tanya. I don't have triceps. Day 6. Got Tanya's message on my answer machine, wondering where I am. Lack the strength to use the TV remote control. Watched 11 straight hours of the shopping channel. Day 7. Well, that's the week. Next time I'll buy myself something a little more fun, like teeth drilling at the dentist. We don't have a right to friends who are beautiful, lovely if they are, but we don't have a right to that. We don't have a right to a husband or wife who are everything the world calls beautiful. We will all age as we get older. We don't have a right to children who are beautiful. God, in His mercy, has given us relationships. And if we are wise, we will learn to love each other in spite of and not just because of. And that's about to hit this little family. And soon it seems all hell breaks loose. It was read to you a moment ago from Exodus 32. And somehow these two, Aaron and Miriam, begin to criticize Moses, criticize his wife and his ministry, and why not us? And God is displeased. In fact, Miriam is smitten with leprosy, and Moses is crying out to God for mercy for her. All hell breaking loose. And suddenly, love is tested. Suddenly, tough times come. Happened to all of us. Happened to us as parents. Think of a church leader. Gave me permission to use the story. Won't tell you his name, but he's driving home with his boy of 14, about 18 months ago. Boy just come back from a youth camp. He says, son, what's that on your arm, a little bracelet? He said, well, Dad, can you see the letters on the bracelet? WWJD. Dad, it means, what would Jesus do? Well, son, he said, that's lovely. Well, Dad, he said, you know, whenever you're in life and you're not sure, you just look at the bracelet and say, what would Jesus do? You know, when our kids say things like that, we're proud of them. We think, hey, we've done a great job. What a great father I am. What a great mother I am. And he said about 6 months later, I come home, my wife and I had been out for the evening, a little earlier than we'd intended, and I come into my street and there's an ambulance outside my home, and a police car. And we get in, and I find my boy on the floor. He and a friend had found some alcohol in the house. He downed half a bottle of whiskey or vodka or something or other. And he said, next thing, I'm in a hospital ward with him, and there are tubes coming out of every part of his body. And I look down and I see on his wrist a bracelet. What would Jesus do? Those are trials of relationship. We would all love our kids to be perfect, to do everything we want. We would love to have kids who are just fantastic in every way. Friends who never let us down. Husbands, wives who never grieve us. But love will be tested. And they came through that tough time. He said the other day we had a little rededication of a new bracelet. I think of another church leader in a prison cell with his 15-year-old daughter. She'd been sleeping around, she'd been on drugs, and now she'd been caught in a burglary. This was a good father. She had a good mother. These are parents who had done well. Let me say it again. These parents had done well. But he's in a prison cell with this kid. He says, darling, you are breaking our heart, but you will never, ever stop us loving you. You understand that, don't you? You will never stop us loving you. Not hard to love the child in the cot. Not hard to love the baby in the bulrushes. You see, there we have got control. I know some of you have got toddlers, and I remember those years. I too have been red-faced in the aisles of supermarkets as my kids have thrown cans of yogurt all over the place. The toddler years are hard, but let me depress you. They don't come close to that day when you look at this boy, this girl, and you realize you really haven't got control. You just haven't. You can send them to bed if they'll go. You can ground them if they come home first, so you can ground them. You don't have control. Love is harder here. In fact, control is at the heart of lots of love, but that's not real love. It's easy to love when we've got control. I hear people say, I've joined a wonderful new church. Oh, it's so lovely. Do you know, it really suits me. I had a letter the other day from someone who told me they were getting out of secular work and into Christian ministry as fast as they could because they were tired of office politics. I couldn't stop laughing for a month. And bless them in their new church. I'm not saying it's never right to move church. Perhaps it is. Bless them in their new church. But I'll tell you, as surely as night follows day, there will come a time when they're not in control, when that place is not as they want. You may have found a wonderful new friend. They're everything you dreamed of, but they will grieve you. And if you are to know love that's worth anything, you're going to probably have to come through them, perhaps even breaking your heart. We cannot love always with control. Think of the cross of Jesus. How much control do you have when somebody has pinned your hands and feet with nails to a piece of wood? An almighty God pinned with nails to a piece of wood saying, I love you. Father, forgive them. This is love. And you must love that child who is breaking your heart. And you mustn't give up with your prodigals. Some of your prodigals are coming home. And you must love again that family member that you've fallen out with. Even that father who has so abused you. And I don't minimize what that man did to you. But somehow, if you possibly can, at least begin, if you can, by God's help, the process of forgiveness. You will find it will begin to set you free. And you know, sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, the tiniest thing can change and make good happen. The tiniest gesture can take a relationship that is in conflict and change it. I remember being in Canada recently, running a marriage seminar, Diane and I together. And it starts at 7:30 and it finishes at 10. And there were a couple in the front row, just where you are sat now. And I'm told they're about to have a divorce. What were they even doing in the seminar? And the chairs are stuck together, you know, because of fire safety. But even so, they are sat on the very edges of the chairs. And so they sit for 2.5 hours. And at 9:45, with 15 minutes of the seminar to go, I watch him reach out and take his wife's hand. And she pulls her hand back. And then I watched as she put her hand back and put her hand over his hand. I could hardly speak for 15 minutes. I was watching the hands. Do you know, it may be, this sounds foolish, but I promise you it's true. It may be that marriage had gone down in a spiral over 20 long years. Unbelievable hurts. It may just be that touch will suddenly begin to rebuild a relationship they thought was gone forever. A touch. It may be a phone call tonight. I can remember speaking to 1,000 church leaders. I said, some of your kids are breaking your hearts. You look at them now and saying, you're not living as we want you to. But you must tell them you still love them. You must tell them your home is always open to them. And I turn, and the chairman is in tears for his own daughter. And he writes to me within a few days and says, I left the conference, I rang my girl. Darling, you have broken our hearts, but we still love you. This home will always be open to you. Sometimes the smallest gesture, I have no doubt Not because I've been any good tonight, but I have no doubt that there will be many, many phone calls made tonight and tomorrow. And you will change relationship, even if those people throw your love back at you. It will eat at them. Love eats at hardness. Love breaks down bitterness. It's hard to fight against love. And we have talked about relationships with single people and parents and married, but let me end briefly by talking about relationships in our ministries, in our Christian ministries, in our churches. You see, Aaron, Moses, and Miriam were committed to ministry for Jehovah. Get these people out of Egypt into the promised land. But terrible conflict came. All over this country, churches are splitting. All over this country. You've heard the old joke about the I know you've heard it, but let me say it again. The American GIs, they rescue a man who's been isolated on a desert island for 50 years. They get there are 3 buildings. They say, what are the buildings? He said, that's my house. What's that one? That's my church. What's that one? That's the church I used to go to. But I'll tell you, it's not funny anymore. It's a scandal. It's a scandal. I met a guy the other day. He said, we got trouble in our church. He lived 500 miles from me. I said, let me tell you what's happening. It's over the youth work, or the building, or the style of worship, probably. And I said, they're a small group of people, and they say, we've been in this church from the beginning. We care about God's name. And they come to you once a week and say, lots of us are worried about X or Y. And you say to them, who are all these people? And they say, well, we don't want to give you names. And they've decided to meet once a week to pray for you. Heaven help you. And they say, we've got something we want to say to you in love. If anyone ever says that to you, get out of the way. I'll tell you, it's a scandal. Listen how Eugene Peterson has paraphrased a part of the book of James. He said, brothers, you must get on with each other. You must get on with each other. You are meant to be honoring the royal law, not writing graffiti all over it. Why do we find it so hard to get along with each other? Well, let me give you some reasons. I'm sorry to mention the first, but I've become convinced it's true. Number one, we're not Christians at all. We are not even in the faith. And ladies and gentlemen, if you and I find ourselves in a situation where there is no evidence of grace in our lives, no evidence of forgiveness, we are always being critical. Our agendas can never be answered. We want this sorted out and that sorted out, and when that's done, we move on to the next thing. We must ask ourselves whether we are in the faith at all. You see, God says some very sobering things to us about what He expects of us and the fruit He expects to see. That's not to say we can't fail. Of course we can, and start again. But if you in your local church are a constant source, if you can never be satisfied, if already you've got 5, 6, 7 churches behind you, just ask yourself, for your soul's sake, I wonder if I'm really in this faith, which has at the heart of it grace and God loving me, and time again being grateful with me and the good He sees in me. Secondly, it may be we are in the faith, but we have forgotten what really matters. Do you know, when Moses led the people out of Egypt, they used to be slaves. They had no straw to make their bricks. They were dying. They were oppressed. They were persecuted. They began to grumble. And you know what they said to him? You will hardly believe it. They said, you know, when we were in Egypt, we had cucumbers. Cucumbers. You read in Numbers 11. And we had leeks and onions and garlic. And Moses looks up to God. You can read it for yourself. Says, oh God, what have I done that you have put the weight of all this people on me? If I mean anything to you, let me die now. Petty criticism can sap the lifeblood from a church. Don't argue. Don't give your life to arguing over whether you have the old green hymn books or the overhead projector. Don't spend your life worrying about the person next to you whether he's got his hands up or hands down. Buildings are important, but don't give your life to stamping and kicking over them. Pray for the youth worker. There are many parents expect the youth worker to do things that they themselves have failed to do. Be a bit more gracious if you possibly can. Somebody read this to me the other day. I was moved greatly. It was a typical annual general church meeting, and the pastor's there, and the pastor is scared as the elder takes the podium. The elder says this: "My friends, I've been attending this church over 20 years. During this time, we've had 3 senior pastors, of which the Reverend Martin is our 3rd. As a congregation, we have dealt with some issues, many more difficult than even this. I deeply regret that what I'm about to do and say has not occurred in this church, at least in the last 20 years. The pastor had slid well down in his seat, and I could actually hear his heart pounding. I would like to ask the other elders to escort Mrs. Martin and Reverend Martin to the podium." He says, "I had recently viewed the film Dead Men Walking, and I noticed a similarity as the 5 men helped this poor soul up the steps." The elder spoke. "Reverend and Mrs. Martin, do you know what day it is today?" They looked at each other. Even if it had been their 25th wedding anniversary, they wouldn't have been able to say. They shook their heads numbly. "Well, dear ones, today all across our land is Clergy Appreciation Sunday. On behalf of the elders in our congregation, I want publicly to express our sincere appreciation and thanks for your sacrificial service to this church." The congregation erupted. People jumped to their feet applauding, some even giving reverential whistles. A bouquet was bought for Mrs. Martin. A gift was handed to Pastor Martin. The elder stepped aside and bid the pastor to speak. He and his wife moved slowly to the podium. And then I noticed a tear, and then another trickled down this couple's cheeks. A lump rose in my own throat. As others in the congregation stood with me, we were now quiet, still standing. Reverend Martin brushed his cheek with the back of his hand and then said words I will never forget. "Barbara and I have been in full-time ministry for over 25 years. This is the first time we have ever received a public thank you and appreciation." Maybe we have a negative spirit. This is what Chuck Swindoll said. "We have no more right to put our discordant states of mind into the lives of those we meet than to rob them of their sunshine, than to break into their houses and steal their silverware. We have no more right to bring our discordant states of mind into the lives of others and rob them of their sunshine than break into their homes and steal their silverware." If you have a negative spirit, ask God, rid you of it. If you can, speak grace and power, and so far as you can, look for the good in others. Next, it may be because we simply don't understand the gravity of it all. Jesus says, if you do not forgive, you will not be forgiven. By the measure you judge, you will be judged. We will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Listen, make it easy on yourself. Let other people off a little more. Be more generous. The Bible says, by that measure you judge, you will be judged. Ladies and gentlemen, church is not for us. Church is not for us. We leave church some Sundays as though we've been to the theater. We say, what did you think of the sermon? What did you think of the worship? What did you think? I didn't enjoy this. I didn't. Church is not for us. This is His church. We are just so privileged to be part of it. Brothers and sisters, if you can, build relationships. You may know the Bible back to front. That is not an evidence of whether you're in the faith. You may spend hours in prayer. That's a wonderful thing to do. Both are wonderful things to do. But I'll tell you, heaven holds its breath when it watches you bless your enemies. I remember two men well known in Spring Harvest. I was with them recently, but a few years ago, publicly they were against each other. And suddenly I see them come into a room together, and I feel the atmosphere change, and then I watch one of them come to the other, and he holds his hand out and he says, "You're very welcome. It's nice to see you." And he puts his hand over the other's hand, and I can imagine heaven saying, "Look, watch now. Oh, look, he puts his hand out. He blesses his enemy." Bless your enemies. Do good to those who despitefully use you. Someone take your coat and have your jacket too. This is the kingdom. You know, ladies and gentlemen, within 50 years, most of us in this tent are going to be dead. We're going to be gone. A lot sooner for most of us. You'll come here, the place will be almost deserted. In that day, we will stand before Jesus. Do you know, in Spring Harvest, again, it was 2 years ago, Dan and I met a woman called Gladys. Her husband was a marathon runner. 34, 35 years old, he caught cancer. And as he lay dying this marathon run, he reached up to Gladys, his wife, and said, "Darling, you will finish the race, won't you? You will break the tape, won't you?" Ladies and gentlemen, I want to finish the race. Poor though I am, in many, many ways, as a Christian, leading care of the family, as a husband and a father, as a friend, but I want to break the tape. And when I stand before him, I do not want to say, "I gave my life to stamping and kicking over these little things." I want to say, "Jesus, I did try to bless my enemies. I did try to build relationships. As you forgave me, I did try hastily and falteringly, and sometimes it took years to forgive. By his grace, walk with me into heaven like that. Break the tape in that way. And by his grace, you and I will not be ashamed." Hallelujah.